A 2009 Honda Civic in the back lot of a Walmart. Frost on the inside of the windshield. A child's breath fogging the back seat glass. A woman sleeps upright behind the wheel. 38 years old. Her hands still gripping nothing. In the passenger seat, a stuffed bear with one eye watches the parking lot. A notebook is open across a 9-year-old lap. The drawing is the same drawing as yesterday. A house, 3 figures, a cat. 17 months in this car, 510 days. Tomorrow a letter will arrive from a town she has never heard of in a state she has never seen. Tomorrow a key will be pressed into her palm by a stranger. But tonight, the cold is still winning. And somewhere east of here, in a cabin in the mountains, every light is on. Waiting. The cold came first, before the light, before the sound of the delivery truck backing into the loading dock. Before anything else. The cold pressed itself against the windows of the 2009 Honda Civic like a thing alive, like a thing that knew them. Claire Donovan opened her eyes. 38 years old. Her breath made small clouds inside the car. The clouds drifted up, touched the ceiling, vanished. Outside the windshield, the parking lot of the Walmart on South Tacoma Way was still mostly empty. Just the sodium lights humming. Just the hush of nothing. She did not move, because moving meant the day had started, and the day was something you had to earn the strength for. Slowly, carefully, like lifting a child you did not want to wake. In the back seat, Hazel was already awake. Claire could tell without looking. She could tell by the way the silence had a thinking shape to it. Her daughter was 9 years old and she did everything quietly, even waking. Especially waking. A small sound, pencil on paper. Claire smiled before she could stop herself. Smiled at the dark ceiling of the Honda. Because Hazel was drawing again. Because Hazel was always drawing. The same picture, over and over. A house, 3 figures holding hands. Sometimes a cat. Lately, always a cat. Good morning, baby. Morning, Mom. You warm enough? Yes. She was not warm enough. Claire knew this. The blanket they shared was a wool army surplus thing that smelled like every parking lot they had ever slept in. But Hazel would say yes. Hazel always said yes. It was the kind of yes that broke your heart if you let it. So Claire did not let it. She sat up, reached for the thermos and the cup holder. The coffee from last night was still inside. Cold now. The color of weak tea. She drank it anyway. Because waste was a kind of luxury, and she had given up luxury 17 months ago. 17 months. That was how long they had been living in this car. She counted in months because counting in days felt obscene. 510 days, give or take, sounded like an accusation. 17 months sounded like something you could survive. Mom, it's Wednesday. I know. Half day. I know, sweetheart. So I get home early. Claire turned, looked at her daughter in the rear view. Hazel's small face was very serious. Her hair was tangled. Her eyes were her grandfather's eyes. Dark, steady, the kind of eyes that saw things and did not look away. Where will I find you? Hazel asked. The library. Okay. I'll be at the long table by the window. Okay. I love you. I love you too, Mom. Such small words, such an ordinary exchange. And yet Claire could feel something in her chest pulling tight as a wire, because they had this conversation every Wednesday. And every Wednesday, she had to swallow the same fear, that one day she would not be there, that one day Hazel would walk in and the long table would be empty, and the world would have finally taken everything. She shook the thought off, reached into the glove box for the baby wipes, handed one back to Hazel. Face and hands, kiddo. I know. And brush your hair. I know, Mom. And no Pop-Tarts before school. Then what? Granola bar. Hazel sighed. It was the dramatic sigh of every 9-year-old who has ever been told no by her mother. And in that sigh, Claire heard something so close to a normal childhood that she had to look away. Out the windshield, at the slowly graying sky, at the seagulls that always came at dawn, even though the ocean was miles away. Birds always know things, her father used to say. Henry Donovan, 23 months in the ground now. Lung cancer. He had never smoked a day in his life. He had laid asphalt for 41 years, and the doctor said it was probably the fumes. The asphalt had killed him slowly, and it had taken him in 11 weeks once they found it. 11 weeks from the first wrong x-ray to the last breath in the hospice bed in Spokane. He had held her hand at the end. He had said, "You are the strongest person I know, Claire." She had not believed him. She still did not believe him. But she remembered the way he said it, the way his voice cracked on her name, the way his fingers were already cool. And sometimes, on the worst nights, she held those words like a stone in her pocket and turned them over and over until they were smooth. "You are the strongest person I know." She did not feel strong. She felt like a woman who used to be a nurse, who used to have a small apartment in Hilltop with a window box of basil, who used to take her daughter to the Children's Museum on Saturdays. Who used to? Who used to? She finished the cold coffee, wiped her face, started the engine just long enough to defrost the windshield, because keys turning meant gas burning, and gas burning meant money. And money was something they no longer had in any meaningful way. The clock on the dashboard read 6:14. Time to move. She drove Hazel to the bus stop 3 blocks from the school. Not the school itself, never the school itself. Because the school had a teacher named Mrs. Brundage who had started asking questions. Where do you live now? Whose address is on the forms? Is everything okay at home? Mrs. Brundage was a kind woman. That was the problem. Kindness in a school employee meant social services, and social services meant a file, and a file meant they would not be Claire and Hazel anymore. They would be a case number. She would not be a case number. She would die first. Hazel kissed her on the cheek before getting out. The kiss was quick and dry and absolutely ordinary. Claire watched her walk away. The yellow backpack, the shoes a half size too small, the way she lifted her chin when she joined the other children, as if to say, "I belong here. I am not less than you." The bus came. The bus went. Claire sat in the driver's seat with her hands on the wheel, and she did not cry. Because crying was for later. Crying was for the shower at the YWCA where she paid $2 and got 8 minutes of hot water. Crying was for the dark, not for the parking lot at 6:27 in the morning when the world was watching. She put the car in gear. She drove. The St. Catherine Women's Shelter sat on the east side of Tacoma in a building that had once been a Catholic school. The bricks were the color of dried roses. The windows had little crosses in the stonework above them. Claire had first walked through that front door when she was 19 years old, with a 6-month-old Hazel in her arms, with a bruise on her cheek shaped like a man's knuckles. That had been a different lifetime, or so she had believed, until 18 months ago when she had walked through the same front door at 36, with a 9-year-old Hazel, with no bruise this time but with something worse. The hollow look of a woman whose family had betrayed her, the look of someone who had run out of people. Sister Agnes had been there both times. Sister Agnes was 72 now. She was small, bird-boned, white hair that she kept in a tidy bun, eyes the gray of weather. She had been at St. Catherine for 46 years, and she had seen everything a woman could see in this world, and she had not lost her capacity for love, which was, Claire thought, the most miraculous thing she had ever witnessed. "Good morning, child." "Morning, sister." "Coffee, please." The coffee at St. Catherine was good, hot, strong, made in an industrial percolator that had been donated in 1987 and refused to die. Claire wrapped her hands around the mug, let the heat travel up her wrists, up into her bones. "You're here early." I needed to use the address. Job applications. 2 of them, Memorial Hospital and a clinic in Lakewood. Nursing. They both said they require active license. And I let mine lapse 6 months ago. I couldn't afford the renewal. Sister Agnes nodded. She did not say anything. She did not need to, because the two of them had been having versions of this conversation for a year and a half. The license, the references, the address, the dignity, the small and constant erosion of a life. There's mail for you. For me, came yesterday afternoon. She handed Claire an envelope, cream-colored, heavy, the kind of paper that cost money. Claire turned it over and read the return address and felt her stomach drop. Pearson Halloran, attorneys at law, Helena, Montana. What is it? I don't know. Open it. What if it's bad? Child, open it. Claire opened it. She read the first paragraph, stopped, read it again. Her hands began to shake. Not a tremor, a real shake. The kind that started at the elbow and traveled down through the wrist and into the fingers until she had to set the letter on the desk to keep from dropping it. Sister, what is it? My uncle. Which uncle? My father's uncle. Walter. Walter Hayes. He died. I'm so sorry, dear. He left me a house. Silence. A long silence in which Sister Agnes did not move, and Claire did not breathe, and the coffee on the desk slowly stopped steaming. A house. In Montana. A cabin. 43 acres. He left it to me and to Hazel. Read me the rest. Claire read it aloud. Her voice did not sound like her own voice. It sounded like a recording of her voice played back through a thin radio. The letter was 3 paragraphs long. It was signed by an Edmund Pierce. There was a check folded inside for $1,500. Travel expenses for her and her daughter, so that they could come and see the property. $1,500. She had not held $1,500 in one piece since her father's funeral. It might be nothing, Claire said. What might be nothing? The house, the land, it could be a shack. It could be falling down. He was an old man. He lived alone. It could be. Child, it could be. Stop. Sister Agnes reached across the desk and took her hand. The old woman's fingers were warm and dry and very strong. Claire looked down at the hand on hers, and she saw the liver spots. The ring she had worn since 1968. The fingernails clipped square. Some good things, Sister Agnes said, come very late. Claire did not speak. But they still come. Your job is to be brave enough to receive them. I don't remember him. That's all right. I met him twice. Once at my father's funeral. He stood at the back. He didn't talk to anyone. He saw you, child. How do you know? Because he left you a house. The bell over the front door rang. Some other woman coming in from some other parking lot with some other story. Sister Agnes squeezed her hand, let go, stood up, smoothed her skirt. You go to that library, she said, and you call this Mr. Pierce, and you tell him you are coming. Sister? Yes. What if I can't do it? The old woman looked at her for a long time. You have done harder things than this. Then she walked away to greet the new woman at the door. Claire sat in the chair with the letter in her hand and the check on the desk, and she made a sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite a sob. It came out of her body without permission. And after it was over, she sat very still. And she felt something that she had not felt in 17 months. She felt the smallest flicker of something dangerous. She felt hope. She used the payphone at the library. The library opened at 9 and she was there at 8:58. The payphone was outside next to the bike rack. It was one of the last working payphones in Tacoma. The receiver smelled like other people's mouths, but Claire did not have a cell phone anymore. The cell phone had been the second thing to go, after the apartment, before the car insurance. She dialed the number on the letterhead. Pearson Halloran, My name is Claire Donovan. I received a letter. Oh, yes, Ms. Donovan. Hold for Mr. Pierce, please. Hold music. Vivaldi. She had not heard Vivaldi in 17 months either. This is Edmund Pierce. Mr. Pierce, I'm Claire Donovan. Ms. Donovan, thank you for calling so quickly. His voice was older than she expected. Roughed by weather, slow, patient. He sounded like a man who had spent most of his life telling people things they did not want to hear and learning to do it gently. Yes, sir. You received the letter. Yes, sir, and the check. Good, good. Now, your Uncle Walter. I knew him for 31 years. He was a private man, but he was very specific about his wishes. The property is for you and your daughter, no one else. Do you understand? I think so. There will be people who will tell you otherwise. People who will come looking. Family, perhaps. Claire said nothing. Ms. Donovan, I'm here. Do you have family who might come looking? A small sound from the back of her throat, almost a laugh, almost not. Yes, sir. Then we should not waste time. Can you come to Helena? How soon? As soon as you can drive here. I have a daughter. She's in school. School can be transferred or completed when you arrive. Cedar Falls has a small school. Excellent, in fact. She closed her eyes, pressed the receiver against her forehead, felt the cool metal against her skin. Mr. Pierce? Yes. Is this real? Ms. Donovan, the deed is on my desk. The key is in my drawer. Your uncle paid the property tax through the year 2056. It is as real as anything I have ever handled in 51 years of practicing law. She breathed out. All right. All right. I'll come. Drive carefully. Mr. Pierce? Yes. Thank you. Don't thank me, Ms. Donovan. Thank your uncle. He waited a long time. She did not understand what he meant. Not then. She would understand later. She called her sister that evening. This was her mistake. She knew it was a mistake even as her fingers pressed the buttons on the payphone. She knew it the way you know a stove is hot, the way you know not to touch the burner. And yet there is a part of you that touches anyway, because you want to be wrong about the heat, because you want just once for the burner to be cool, for the family to be a family. Vivian picked up on the third ring. This is Vivian Donovan. Viv, it's me. A long pause. Claire. Yes. What do you want? Dad's uncle died, Uncle Walter, the one in Montana. Okay, and he left me a cabin. He left me 43 acres. The laughter was the worst part. It was not even cruel laughter. That was what shocked Claire. It was casual. It was the sound of a woman who was busy, who was being interrupted from something more important, who could not be bothered to even rise to the level of cruelty. Oh, Claire. What? He left you a shack. It's a cabin, Viv. It's on 43 acres. Where is it? Jefferson County, outside of Helena. Honey, that's nowhere. That's nothing. It's a house. It's an outhouse with a roof. Dad's uncle was a hermit. Viv, listen to me. Listen. Sign it over. What? Sign it over to Teddy. He has a real estate license. He can list it. We split the money 4 ways. 4 ways? Yes. Why 4? Claire. Why 4, Viv? Where's Marcus? Marcus doesn't need money. Where am I in the 4? You're in the 4. Of course you're in the 4. I'm the 5th one, Viv. There are 5 of us. Dad had 5 children. A sigh. The kind of sigh that has teeth in it. Vivian had been making this sigh at her since they were children. Since Claire was 6 and Vivian was 12. Since the day Claire had wanted to play with Vivian's friends and Vivian had decided forever that Claire would be small. Claire would be the dim one. Claire would be the one to be managed. Honey, you can barely manage your own car. You think you can manage a piece of property in Montana. It's mine, Viv. Be reasonable. It's mine. Honey, listen to your sister. You live in a parking lot. You let your nursing license expire. You are not in a position to. It's mine. He named me. Then he was confused. He was 89 years old. He was not confused. Claire, sweetheart, let the adults handle this. The adults. Claire stood at the payphone in the cold and she felt the word travel through her chest like a knife. Let the adults handle this. She was 38 years old. She had raised a daughter alone since the age of 19. She had worked 2 jobs and gotten through nursing school and put food on a table for a decade until everything collapsed. And to her sister, she was still 6, still small, still the one to be managed. There were footsteps behind her. She turned. Hazel was standing 6 feet away, backpack on one shoulder, hair in a crooked ponytail. Her face was very white. Her eyes were very dark. She had heard everything, or enough. Claire's stomach dropped. Honey, is that Aunt Vivian? Hazel, is it? Through the receiver, Vivian's voice distant and impatient. Claire, are you there? Who are you talking to? Hazel walked forward. She held out her hand. Claire looked at her daughter's hand and then at her daughter's face, and she did something she would think about later. For years. She handed her daughter the receiver. Hello. Who is this? This is Hazel. Oh, for God's sake, My name is Hazel Donovan and I am 9 years old and I want to say something. A laugh. Vivian's laugh. The one that meant she was about to be cruel because she was uncomfortable. Honey, put your mother back on. This isn't. You are wrong. Excuse me. You are wrong. My mother is not weak. You are the weak one. You took the money from Grandpa. You promised to pay it back. You did not pay it back. My mother slept in a car. I slept in a car for 510 days. Hazel, sweetheart. Do not call me sweetheart. Silence, a new silence. Not the silence of waiting. The silence of a woman who has just been spoken to in a way she has not been spoken to in many years, possibly ever. My mother is going to Montana. We are going to Montana. The cabin is ours. Uncle Walter gave it to us. Not to you. He gave it to us because he saw us, because he saw her. You don't know what you're... Goodbye, Aunt Vivian. Hazel hung up the phone. She set the receiver in its cradle with both hands, carefully, like she was setting a bird in a nest. And then she stood very still on the sidewalk outside the Tacoma Public Library, and her shoulders began to shake. Claire dropped to her knees, right there on the wet concrete. She did not care about her pants. She did not care about anything. She pulled her daughter into her chest, and Hazel made a small sound, the sound of 9 years coming out in one breath, and she said into Claire's shoulder, very small, very quietly, I'm sorry, Mom. Don't be sorry. I shouldn't have. Hazel, look at me. The girl looked up. Don't ever be sorry for telling the truth to a person who needed to hear it. Do you understand me? Yes. Say it back. I won't be sorry for telling the truth. Good girl. Good, good girl. They stayed there for a long time. The library opened. Patrons stepped around them politely. Nobody said anything. Tacoma was the kind of city where you minded your own business, especially when the business was a mother on the wet concrete with her daughter, and you could see, even from a distance, that something important was happening. When they finally stood up, Claire could see that Hazel's face was different, older. Not in a bad way, not in the way that a hard life makes children old too fast, in a different way. The way a person looks when they have done something brave and learned that they were able to do it. Hazel had a small new line at the corner of her mouth, and her shoulders sat a quarter-inch higher than they had that morning. Hazel. Yes, Mom. How would you feel about Montana? When? Now. Today. Tomorrow. Day after. Hazel thought about it. She did not bounce. She did not squeal. She thought about it, with her grandfather's eyes, with her grandfather's seriousness. Will there be a bus stop? Eventually, I think so. Will there be other kids? I think so. There's a town, Cedar Falls. Will we have an address? Yes. She nodded once. Then yes. Claire took her daughter's hand and they walked into the library together, and she did not for the first time in 17 months look back at the parking lot. They left on a Thursday. It took them one day to pack the car because there was almost nothing to pack. Sister Agnes pressed $40 into Claire's hand even though Claire tried to refuse. A woman named Doreen from the shelter gave Hazel a stuffed bear because she said every road trip needs a co-pilot. The bear was missing one eye. Hazel named him Officer Button and put him in the front seat with great seriousness. Officer Button rode shotgun. Hazel rode him back with her notebook and a road atlas Sister Agnes had given her. A paper one, with folds. Hazel had never used a paper map in her life and she treated it like a sacred text. Mom. Yes. We take I-90 east. Yes. For about 800 miles. Yes. Are we going to drive 800 miles today? No, baby. We'll go as far as we can. Then we'll stop. Then we'll keep going. Where will we stop? A rest area or a truck stop. Somewhere with bathrooms. Okay. She wrote it down in her notebook, as if making a record, as if someday someone might ask her about this trip, and she wanted to have her facts straight. They drove east. Claire watched Tacoma get smaller in the rear view. The water, the mountains in the distance, the gray sky that she had stopped seeing because she had been inside of it for so long. Then the city was gone, and they were among the trees of the Cascades. The road climbing, the Honda struggling, the needle on the temperature gauge climbing higher than she liked. Hazel pressed her face to the window. Mom. Yes. Everything is very big. It is. Is Montana bigger than this? Much bigger. How will we know when we get there? There will be a sign. What if we miss the sign? We won't miss the sign. She did not miss the sign. Hazel saw it first, 3 days later, after 2 nights in rest areas that smelled like diesel, after 1,000 peanut butter sandwiches, after Officer Button had ridden in 3 different positions and Hazel had drawn 17 new houses in her notebook. The sign was simple, blue, 3 words. Welcome to Montana. Hazel made a sound, a small sound, halfway between a gasp and a prayer. Mom, I see it. We did it. We did, baby. We are in Montana. We are. Hazel was quiet for a long time after that. Claire glanced in the rear view now and then to make sure she was all right. Each time Hazel was looking out the window. The sky was bigger here. That was the only word for it. The land just kept going. The mountains rose in the distance and seemed to keep their distance no matter how far you drove, like they were ahead of you, forever. It was late afternoon when they reached Helena. Helena was not what Claire expected. She had expected a town. What she found was a small city in a valley with mountains all around it like cupped hands. The streets were clean. The buildings were old. There was a gold dome capitol and a brick downtown and an Albertsons and a Walmart and a hospital and 3 coffee shops on the same block. People walked at a different pace than Tacoma. Slower. Like they had decided that hurry was a thing other people did. Pierce and Halloran was on Last Chance Gulch. The street was named that because gold had been found there in 1864, and the men who found it had been on their last attempt, their last chance. Claire would learn that later. For now, she just parked the Honda in front of the brick building and turned off the engine and sat for a moment with her hands on the wheel. Mom, yes. I'm scared. Me too. What if he was wrong? Who? Mr. Pierce, what if the letter was a mistake? Claire turned around in her seat, looked at her daughter. Hazel was holding Officer Button against her chest. Then we will turn around and we will drive home. Where is home, Mom? She did not have an answer for that. She did not need one. Because Hazel said, let's go find out. And they got out of the car. Edmund Pierce was 74 years old. He was tall, he stooped a little. His hair was white and combed straight back from a high forehead. He wore a tan corduroy jacket with patches on the elbows and a string tie with a piece of turquoise the size of a thumbnail. His office smelled like old paper and saddle leather. There were no diplomas on the wall. There was a framed photograph of him as a younger man on a horse. There was an oil painting of a river. There was a chair behind a desk so old it might have belonged to Lewis or Clark. He stood up when Claire and Hazel walked in. He walked around the desk. He held out his hand to Claire first. Then, and this was the moment that Claire would remember always, then he knelt down, slowly, the way an old man kneels, with one hand on his knee, and he held out his other hand to Hazel. You must be Hazel. Yes, sir. My name is Edmund. I knew your uncle for a long time. Was he a nice man? He was a quiet man. The two are not always the same. But yes, he was a nice man. Hazel nodded, as if filing this away. Edmund stood up, took longer to stand than he had to kneel. Sit, both of you. Coffee, Ms. Donovan. Yes, please. And juice for the young lady. What kind of juice? Apple or orange, whichever you prefer. Apple. Apple it is. He brought the drinks himself from a small kitchen at the back. He set them down. He took his seat. He folded his hands on the desk. He looked at Claire and his eyes were very pale and very kind. Ms. Donovan, your Uncle Walter? Yes. Tell me what you know about him. Claire opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Almost nothing. All right. I met him twice. Once when I was a child, I think. I have a memory of an old man at a Christmas. He gave my brother Marcus a pocket knife. My brother cut his finger on it within an hour. There was a lot of yelling. I don't know if it was Walter. It might have been. Then, at my father's funeral, there was a man at the back of the church. He didn't speak to anyone. He didn't come to the reception. I was told later it was him. Yes, that's all I know. All right. He nodded, took a sip of his own coffee, set the cup down very carefully on a coaster shaped like Montana. Then let me tell you about him. Please. Your Uncle Walter Hayes was born in 1935 in Butte, Montana. He was the youngest of four. He went to college at Montana State on a scholarship. He worked for the United States Forest Service for 31 years. He started as a fire lookout in the Helena National Forest. He retired as a district supervisor. He was by every account a man who took the woods very seriously. He paused. He looked at his hands. He was engaged once. Her name was Margaret Hollis. She was a school teacher. They met when he was 29 and she was 27. They were to be married in October of 1965. He paused again. There was a fire in August, a bad one, east of the Continental Divide. Margaret was a volunteer. She was helping evacuate horses from a ranch in the path of the burn. She was crossing a creek to get to one more horse. The creek was running high. She fell. She drowned. Hazel made a small sound. Claire reached over and took her daughter's hand without looking. Walter never married. He built the cabin you are about to see in the 2 summers after Margaret's death. He cut every log himself. He carried every stone for the chimney from a creek bed 4 miles away. He used to say that he was not building a house. He was burying a feeling. I told him once that was a strange way to bury a feeling, and he said it was the only way he had been able to think of. Mr. Pierce? Yes. Why did he leave it to me? Edmund looked at her for a long moment. He stood up. He walked to a small wooden cabinet in the corner of the room. He opened it. He took out a long manila envelope. He carried it back to the desk. He did not open it. Your uncle came to me 31 years ago. He brought a piece of paper. On the paper he had written 4 names. Your father, Henry, and your father's 3 brothers. Then he had written beneath those the names of all the children, all of you. And he had written beside each name a date, the dates of the family events at which he had observed you, weddings, funerals, 2 reunions. He told me he had been watching from a distance. Claire could not breathe. He told me that watching was all he had been able to do for a long time, but that he was getting older and he wanted to make a decision about who would receive what he had built. And he asked me as his attorney to record certain observations. What observations? Of all of you, the children, over time. He continued to visit me once a year for 31 years. He would tell me what he had seen. I would write it down. Eventually, he made his choice. He slid the envelope across the desk. You don't need to read this now. There is more inside the cabin. There is more Ms. Donovan than you can imagine right now. But I want you to know one thing. Before you go up to that property, before you walk through that door. He waited. She nodded for him to continue. Your uncle once told me, said Edmund Pierce, that of all his nieces and nephews and cousins and second cousins, you were the only one who gave without counting. He said that was the rarest thing in the world, and he said that someone like that in this life deserved a house with mountains behind it. Claire could not speak. Edmund opened a drawer. He took out a brass key. It was old, worn smooth, the kind of key that had been turned 10,000 times by the same hand. He pressed it into her palm. Welcome home, Ms. Donovan. The road to the cabin was an hour and a half of paved road, and then 30 minutes of gravel, and then 20 minutes of something that was barely a road at all. Edmund drove ahead of them in his old Chevy pickup. Claire followed in the Honda. The Honda was not made for this road. The Honda complained the whole way. The Honda was a city car, and now the Honda was being asked to be a country car, and the Honda was making it known. Hazel did not complain. Hazel had her face pressed against the window for most of the drive. She had not said a word in 20 minutes. Claire glanced at her in the rear view now and then. Each time Hazel was looking at something different. The pine trees, the sky, a hawk on a fence post, a creek with stones in it the color of cinnamon, a meadow with 3 deer standing very still and watching them pass. Then they came around a curve, and the trees opened, and there was the cabin. It sat in a clearing on a small rise. 2 stories. Hand-hewn logs darkened to the color of honey by 60 years of weather. A steep metal roof gone green with age. A stone chimney rising from the center as if it were holding the whole house up. A wide porch wrapped around the front. The porch railings were carved with patterns. Claire could not see what the patterns were from the car. She would see later. They were birds. Behind the cabin, the mountains rose. The mountains were not in the distance. The mountains were right there. The mountains were the backyard. Claire stopped the car. She did not put it in park. She just stopped. She sat with her foot on the brake and her hands on the wheel, and she looked at the cabin, and she could not understand what she was looking at. Because this was not a shack. This was not a hermit's hovel. This was a house that a man had built with his own hands slowly over years, with attention and love and grief. This was a house. This was a house. In the back seat, Hazel made a sound. A small, perfect gathering sound. The sound a person makes when they have been holding their breath for a long time without knowing it. And then she said very quietly, Mom, yes. That's our house. Yes. That's our house. Yes, baby. Edmund had pulled up ahead of them. He had gotten out of his truck. He was standing by the porch steps with his hands in his pockets waiting, not watching them, looking at the mountains, giving them the moment. Claire put the car in park. She turned off the engine. In the silence, she could hear the wind in the pines. She got out. She opened the back door. Hazel climbed out slowly like she was afraid the whole thing might disappear if she moved too fast. Officer Button hung from one of her hands by his ear. With the other hand, she reached for her mother. They walked across the clearing together. The grass had not been cut in months. It was tall and brown around their ankles. There were yellow flowers in it. Claire did not know what they were called. Black-eyed Susans, she would learn later. Walter had brought the seeds in his pocket from a trip in 1972, and they had naturalized. She did not know any of this yet. Yet. At the porch steps, Edmund handed her the key again, as if he wanted her to have the ceremony of it, as if he understood that this was the kind of moment that had to be done correctly. "Mr. Pierce?" "Yes." "Will you come in with us?" "No, ma'am, I won't. This first time is for the two of you. I'll wait out here, then I'll show you where the well is, and the wood, and I'll come back tomorrow with supplies, and we'll talk about what comes next." She nodded. She climbed the porch steps. The boards were thick and solid. They did not creak. They had been milled and hand-fitted by a man who took the work of a porch very seriously. She crossed to the door. The door was made of 3 vertical planks of cedar banded with black iron. There was a brass plate around the keyhole. The brass was the same age as the key. She fit the key into the lock. She turned it. The lock did not stick. It opened the way a good lock opens, with a small click that was almost a word. Claire pushed the door. The door swung inward without a sound. Warm air came out. Not warm because there was a fire. Warm because the cabin had spent the morning in the sun and the logs had held the heat. The smell that came out was the smell of wood smoke long ago, and pine sap, and old books, and something underneath all of those that Claire did not have a name for. Peace, maybe. The smell of a place where peace had lived a very long time. Hazel went in first. Claire led her. Her daughter took 3 steps inside, stopped, turned slowly in a circle in the middle of the main room, looked at the stone fireplace that rose 2 stories, looked at the bookshelves built into every wall, looked at the kitchen with its iron stove and its hand pump at the sink, looked at the staircase that wound up to the loft, looked at the windows that faced the mountains, the windows that were big and clean and let in the light like the cabin had been built specifically to let in this light. This light. This particular Montana late afternoon light. She looked at all of it. Then she looked at her mother in the doorway. Her face was wet and she did not seem to know it. "Mom." "Yes, baby. We have a home." Claire put one hand on the door frame to keep herself standing. "Yes," she said. "We have a home." And outside on the porch, Edmund Pierce took off his hat and held it against his chest and looked at the mountains. And up on the small hill behind the cabin, a magpie called twice and then went silent. And somewhere in the high meadows, the elk were beginning to move toward water. And somewhere in another country, in another time, a man named Walter Hayes had laid down the last log of this house 60 years ago and had stood up and had put his hand on the wood and had said to no one in particular, "I'll keep it ready." He had kept it ready, and now they were here. The first morning in the cabin, Claire did not know where she was. She opened her eyes. White ceiling, pine planks, a square of yellow light moving slowly across them. She thought for one heartbeat that she was in a motel. Then she thought she was in a hospital. Then she remembered Montana, the cabin, theirs. She lay very still, because moving might break it, because the last 17 months had taught her that the body could go to bed in one place and wake up in another, and not in a good way. And you had to be careful with mornings. You had to test them. You had to lie there and feel for the shape of the day. She felt it. The day had a shape like a bowl, empty, waiting to be filled. She listened. There were no engines. There were no voices. There were no carts being pushed across asphalt. There was a bird, then another bird, then a long silence in which she could hear faintly water running somewhere. The creek behind the house, the little creek that Edmund had pointed out to her yesterday before he left, the creek that gave the property its water. She rolled onto her side, looked out the window. The mountains were still there. She had half expected them to be gone. Hazel was already up. Claire could hear her downstairs, small feet on pine floorboards, the clink of something against something, the murmur of a voice talking to a stuffed bear. Claire smiled into the pillow. Then she pushed herself up, found her sweater on the floor where she had dropped it, pulled it over her head, tied her hair back with the rubber band she had been using for 2 days because all her hair ties were in a box somewhere in the back of the Honda. She came down the stairs slowly because the stairs were old, because she did not want to surprise her daughter, because she wanted to see for one more moment what 9 years old looked like in a kitchen of her own. Hazel was standing at the iron stove. She was wearing Walter's flannel shirt over her pajamas. The flannel hung past her knees. The sleeves she had rolled up 6 times. She had pulled a chair to the stove, and she was poking at something in a pan with a wooden spoon. Officer Button sat on the counter in a place of honor. Officer Button was supervising. "Hi, Mom. Hi, baby. I'm making eggs. Are you?" There were eggs in the cooler that the lawyer man brought. There were 3. Where did you find a pan? Hanging on the wall. Where did you find a spoon? Drawer by the sink. Are you using the stove? Yes. Claire took a breath. She let it out slowly. Hazel. Yes. Did you start the fire in the stove? Yes. How? With the matches. There were matches in the tin on the shelf, and I used the kindling from the box. And I made it small first like you taught me with the camping stove, and then I made it bigger. You made it bigger. Just a little bigger. To cook the eggs. Claire did not know whether to laugh or cry. She did both. She walked across the kitchen and she put her arms around her daughter from behind. She kissed the top of Hazel's head. The hair smelled like wood smoke and pine sap already. Already. After one night. You scrambled the eggs. Yes. Without me. You were sleeping. You never sleep, Mom. I never sleep. Now you can sleep. Claire put her face into her daughter's hair, and she did not say anything for a long time. The first week was strange. It was strange because nothing happened. That was the strangeness. Claire's body had been calibrated for 17 months to the constant low hum of disaster. The sound of a security guard's flashlight tapping on glass. The sound of a parking lot speaker calling for backup. The sound of a child coughing in cold air. Her body had learned to live inside that hum the way other bodies learn to live inside a city. Now the hum was gone. And without the hum, her body did not know what to do. She woke at 4 in the morning the first 3 nights. Bolt upright, heart slamming, looking for the threat, listening. There was no threat. There was only the creek and a great horned owl out in the timber, and Hazel's small breath in the next room. Claire would sit there in the dark for 45 minutes, waiting. For something. For anything. Until she would realize slowly that nothing was coming. And then she would lie down. And she would press her hand flat against the pine planks of the wall beside her bed. And she would say in her head, "The cabin is real. The cabin is real," until she fell back asleep. Hazel had no such trouble. Hazel slept like she was making up for 9 years of half-sleeping. She slept 12 hours a night. She woke at 7. She ate. She went outside. She named the trees. She named the squirrels. She named a black and white bird that she saw on the fence post and that Edmund would later tell her was a magpie. She named the magpie Captain Bartholomew. Captain Bartholomew came back every morning. Hazel began leaving him a peanut on the porch railing. He took it. She wrote about it in her notebook. On the 4th morning, Hazel came in from outside with her cheeks very red and her eyes very bright, and she said, "Mom, there is a lady." "What lady?" "A lady on a horse coming down the road." Claire was at the sink trying to get the hand pump to give her water that did not taste like iron. She straightened up, wiped her hands on a dish towel, looked out the kitchen window. There was a lady on a horse coming down the road. The road was a dirt track that led out of Walter's property and joined the gravel road 2 miles down. The lady was riding a sorrel mare. She was sitting in the saddle the way people sit who have been sitting in saddles their whole lives. Loose, easy, reins in one hand, the other hand resting on her thigh. She was wearing a tan canvas barn coat, jeans, brown boots, a wide-brimmed hat. She had to be 65 if she was a day. She rode up to the porch. She stopped the horse with a small click of her tongue. She looked down at Claire and Hazel through the screen door. She did not smile. "You must be Claire." "I am." "I'm Ruth Calloway. I live 2 miles south. I was Walter's neighbor for 31 years. Claire opened the screen door, stepped out onto the porch. "Mrs. Calloway." "Ruth, please." "Claire." "I know. Walter told me." A pause. The horse shifted its weight, blew air through its nose. A long, slow hoarse sigh. "He told you about me." "He did. What did he tell you?" Ruth Calloway looked at her for a long moment. She had a face like a riverbed, lines that the weather had put there over a long time, pale blue eyes, white hair cut short under the hat. She had the kind of face that did not lie, that had not lied in many years, that had decided lying was a thing other people did. "He told me Ruth said that he was waiting for someone. He didn't say who. He just said someone was coming. Eventually." Claire could not speak. "I brought you bread," Ruth said. She reached behind her into a saddlebag, pulled out a loaf wrapped in a checkered cloth, leaned down, handed it across the railing. "And a cat." "A what?" "A cat. Hold on." She reached into the other saddlebag and pulled out a kitten. A tabby kitten, about 6 weeks old, striped, sleepy. The kitten blinked at the morning and yawned without any particular opinion of being yawned at. Ruth handed the kitten down to Hazel. "My barn cat had 5. I have homes for 3. This one is yours if your mother says yes." Hazel did not speak. Hazel took the kitten with both hands. She held it against her chest. She looked up at her mother, and her eyes were the eyes of every child who has ever needed something to live. And Claire knew in that instant that there had never really been a question. "What's his name?" Claire said. "Hers," said Ruth. "Hers." Hazel looked down at the kitten. The kitten looked up at Hazel. The kitten yawned again. "Pancake," Hazel said. "Pancake," said Ruth, "because she's stripy like a pancake, like the kind with bacon on top." "That'll do," said Ruth. She tipped her hat. She turned the horse. She started back down the road, and then she paused and she looked back over her shoulder. "I'll come Sunday, with coffee, and we'll talk." "Yes, ma'am." "Ruth. Ruth." She rode away. Claire stood on the porch with a loaf of bread in her hands and her daughter holding a kitten, and she watched the woman on the sorrel mare get smaller and smaller down the dirt road. And she thought, this is real. This is real. This is real. Pancake the kitten lived in Hazel's flannel shirt for the next 2 days. Then she lived everywhere. Ruth came on Sunday. She came in a Ford pickup older than the cabin. She brought a thermos of coffee. She brought a coffee cake. She brought for Hazel a book about Montana birds. She sat on the porch with Claire and they drank coffee, and they did not talk for the first 15 minutes. They just sat and drank and watched the wind move through the pines. Then Ruth said, "Tell me about your daughter's name." "Hazel." "Hazel, where does it come from?" "It was my grandmother's name, my father's mother. She died when I was small. But she used to make me a kind of butter cookie with a thumbprint of jam in the middle. I don't know why I remember that, but I do. And when I had a baby and I was 19 and I had nothing and I had run from a man who had hit me, I needed a name that meant something. And I thought about those cookies, and I thought about my grandmother, and I named her Hazel." Ruth nodded. She did not say anything for a long time. Then she said, "Tell me about Walter." "You knew him." "I knew him, but I want to know what you know about him." So Claire told her. About the funeral, about the man at the back of the church, about Edmund Pierce, about the 31 years of observation, about being chosen. Ruth listened. When Claire was done, Ruth set her coffee cup on the porch railing, and she folded her hands in her lap and she said, I have something to tell you. Not yet, not today, but soon. Walter left some things in the cabin. He told me once that you would find them. He said it like he was sure, like the way a man speaks who has already seen a thing he is talking about. I don't know what those things are, but you will find them. And when you find them, I want you to come and tell me, and we will talk about it together. All right, all right, all right. Ruth left at noon. Claire stood on the porch and watched the truck go, and she thought about what Ruth had said. Walter left some things in the cabin. He told me once that you would find them. She thought about it that afternoon. She thought about it that evening. She did not think about it on Monday because on Monday she had to drive Hazel down to Cedar Falls to enroll her in the school. Cedar Falls was a town of 312 people. The school had one building, pre-K through 8th grade. The teacher who would be Hazel's teacher was named Mrs. Annalise Pratt. Mrs. Pratt was 34 years old. She had grown up in Cedar Falls. She had gone to college in Bozeman. She had come back. Her hair was the color of new corn. She wore wire-rimmed glasses. She asked Hazel 3 questions about books, and on the 3rd question, Hazel said, I like Charlotte's Web, but I think Wilbur is kind of dumb. And Mrs. Pratt laughed and said, wait until you read the second half. He gets less dumb. Hazel was enrolled. Hazel had a desk. Hazel had a teacher who laughed. Claire drove back up the mountain alone for the first time in 18 months in a car that was hers, on a road that led to a house that was hers, and she had to pull over at a turnout, and she had to sit with her hands on the wheel, and she had to cry for 15 minutes. Not because anything was wrong, because something for the first time in too long was right. The body did not know what to do with right. The body had to let it out. Then she dried her face, drove home. It was Hazel who found it. Of course it was Hazel. It was the second Saturday in the cabin. Claire was at the kitchen table going through Walter's mail. The mail had been piling up at the post office in Cedar Falls. Bills mostly, property tax statements, a subscription to Foreign Affairs, a note from someone named Henry at the Forest Service who said he was sorry to hear about Walter and that the trout were running. Hazel was in the main room with the tape measure she had found in Walter's workshop. She was measuring things. She had been measuring things for 3 days. The couch, the fireplace, the window frames, the rugs. She was making a map of the cabin in her notebook, to scale. Mrs. Pratt had taught them about scale on Thursday, and Hazel was applying her education. Mom, yes? Come here. Why? Just come here, please. Claire came. Hazel was standing by the fireplace. She had her notebook open. She had numbers written on it. She had a small frown between her eyebrows that Claire had been seeing on her father's face for 30 years and now saw on her daughter's. What is it, baby? The wall outside, yes, is 42 feet long. Okay. The wall inside from here to here, and then plus the kitchen, and plus the closet under the stairs, yes, is 38 feet. Claire looked at her daughter's notebook, looked at the numbers, looked at the wall, looked back at the numbers. That's not right, Mom. That's 4 feet. That's 4 feet. Where would 4 feet? I don't know, but it would be behind there, behind the fireplace. They both looked at the fireplace. The fireplace took up the whole north wall, stone from floor to ceiling, river stones in every color of brown and gray and rust. The hearth was a single great slab of slate the size of a coffee table. The mantel was a beam of hand-hewn oak as thick as a man's leg. The mantel was carved. Hazel had been looking at the carving for a week. The carving was birds. Dozens of birds, maybe 50, hawks and owls and finches, a heron at one end, a pelican at the other, which was strange because there were no pelicans in Montana. There were eagles, there were ravens, there were swallows in flight, And in the lower right corner of the mantel, almost hidden, there was a small wren. The wren was smaller than the other birds. Not by much, just a little. And the wood around the wren was darker than the wood around the other birds. Darker, smoother, the way wood gets when it has been touched 1,000 times by the same finger. Hazel had noticed this on day 3. She had not said anything, because some part of her had wanted to be the one to find it. Now she pointed. "Mom, look at this bird." Claire looked. She saw what her daughter saw. She pressed her finger against the wren. The wren depressed, about 1/4 of an inch, with a small, almost mechanical click that they felt more than heard. Somewhere behind the fireplace something moved, stone on stone. A long, slow grinding, the sound of weight shifting on a counterweight that had not been used in years. Claire grabbed her daughter by the arm and pulled her backward 2 steps. Just in time. Because the slate hearth, the great slab of slate that they had walked across every day for 2 weeks, lifted, not flipped, not flew, lifted, hinged, tilted up on a pivot they could not see, maybe 4 inches at first, then 6, then a foot. Then it rose up and back on some old cunning mechanism until it stood almost vertical against the stone of the fireplace. And underneath it, where the floor had been, where the hearth had been, was a set of stone stairs descending into the dark. Claire stopped breathing. She put one hand on Hazel's shoulder, held her there. "Don't move." "I'm not." "I mean it. I'm not moving, Mom." Claire walked carefully to the edge of the opening. Looked down. The stairs went down a long way, 12, maybe 14 steps, carved out of the bedrock itself. They were not new. They had been cut by hand, probably by Walter decades ago. The air that came up from the opening was cool, dry. It smelled like paper and like old wood and like the inside of a library on a winter morning. Claire turned, looked at her daughter. Hazel's eyes were enormous. "Mom, I know. Was Walter?" "I don't know. A spy?" "I don't think so, baby." "Then what?" "I don't know." Claire stood at the edge of the opening for a full minute. She did not know what to do. There were 2 parts of her. The mother part, which said close it. Close it now. Take your daughter out of this house and call Edmund Pierce. And the other part. The part that had been chosen by an old man she had never really known. The part that knew somehow that whatever was down there was for her. Was the reason. Was the answer. She turned, walked to the kitchen, took the long flashlight off the hook by the door, tested it. The beam was strong. Walter kept his batteries fresh. Walter kept everything ready. She came back. She knelt by the opening. "Hazel." "Yes." "I'm going to go down first." "I'm coming with you." "Hazel." "I'm coming with you." She looked at her daughter. She did not argue. Because Hazel was the one who had found it. Because some things you go down into together. The stairs were steep, but they were even. Each step the same height as the one before. Walter had cut them with a measuring stick and a chisel, and he had not made a single one wrong. Claire counted them as she went down. 12. The flashlight beam moved ahead of her, and Hazel followed 2 steps behind with one hand on the back of Claire's sweater. At the bottom, the room opened. Claire moved the flashlight slowly across the space. She heard her own breath leave her. The chamber was vaulted. The ceiling was held up by hand-hewn timbers, the same as the cabin above. The walls were dressed stone. They had been dressed by hand. Claire could see the chisel marks. The floor was flagstone swept clean. The room was about 20 feet by 20 feet. There were shelves on every wall, floor to ceiling. The shelves were full of crates and books and glass cases. In the center of the room was a desk, a heavy oak desk. On the desk, an oil lamp, a pen, a leather-bound book, a pair of reading glasses with one earpiece mended with wire. The reading glasses were lying open, as if a man had just set them down. Claire moved the flashlight over the shelves. On one shelf, there were paintings wrapped in muslin stacked carefully. On one shelf, there were books leather-bound with gold on the spines. On one shelf, there were small wooden cases like jewelry cases, but heavier. On one shelf, there were ledgers, numbered. On one shelf, there were glass cases of coins. Claire stood in the middle of the room with her daughter's hand on her sweater, and she said out loud to no one, "Oh, Walter." It took them 3 hours to even begin to understand. They opened the first crate. Inside the crate, wrapped in archival paper, was a painting. A small painting, the size of a placemat, an oil on canvas, mountains, sky, a river running through the foreground with two figures standing beside it. The signature in the lower right corner was small and neat. A. Bierstadt. Claire knew vaguely who Albert Bierstadt was. She did not know how much an Albert Bierstadt was worth. She would find out later that evening when she opened the leather-bound book on the desk and began to read. The book was Walter's ledger. He had kept it for 31 years. Every item in the room, every painting, every book, every coin, every share of stock, date acquired, price paid, provenance, estimated current value, updated in pencil almost annually. The Bierstadt had been bought at an estate sale in Helena in 1976. Walter had paid $600 for it. The most recent estimate, dated 4 years ago, valued it at $300,000. She turned the page. A first edition of Hemingway's A Farewell to Arms, bought in 1981 at a junk shop in Butte for $45. Current estimate, $28,000. She turned the page. 20 Roman coins, bought across 6 years in the 80s and 90s. Combined estimate, $58,000. She turned the page. She turned the page. She turned the page. Stock certificates. Apple Computer purchased in 1981. Microsoft purchased in 1986. IBM purchased earlier. Berkshire Hathaway. Coca-Cola. All held, all compounded, all reinvested dividends. The last page of the stock register was dated 4 years ago. The number at the bottom of the page made Claire close the book, made her sit down on the stone floor, made her put her head between her knees. Hazel knelt beside her. "Mom?" "Yes." "What is it, Mom?" "It's a lot of money, baby." "How much?" "A lot." "How much, Mom?" "Don't worry about it right now." "Mom?" "It's $38 million, baby. It's about $38 million. Hazel did not say anything. She was 9. She did not really know what 38 million meant, but she could see her mother's hands shaking, and she could see her mother's face, and she did the only thing that she could think to do, which was to put her small arms around her mother's neck and rest her cheek against her mother's hair, and to say, "It's okay, Mom, it's okay, it's okay. He wanted you to have it." Claire put her face into her daughter's shoulder, and she made a sound. Not a sob, not a laugh. Something else. Something that came from deeper than either. Then she lifted her head, because there was a second book on the desk. Smaller, soft leather, the kind of book a man keeps in his coat pocket. She had not noticed it the first time. She picked it up, she opened it. The first page said, "Private for Claire." She read it, she read the whole thing. It was a journal, 40-some pages, handwritten in pencil, Walter's hand, small neat letters, the kind of handwriting taught in Montana schools in 1942. The first entry was dated 1979. Claire had been 6 years old in 1979. "I went to my nephew Henry's house today for the Easter dinner. The little one Claire gave the last roll on the platter to her cousin without being asked. She did not seem to notice that she had done it. I noticed." The next entry was 1986. "Henry's daughter Claire is 13. She came up to me at the family picnic and she asked me if I was lonely. I told her no. She said she thought I was. She brought me a plate of food that no one had asked her to bring. She sat with me for the rest of the afternoon. We did not speak much. She did not seem to need to." The next entry was 1992. "Claire is 19. She is at a women's shelter in Tacoma. She has a baby. Henry told me on the phone. He cried. I have made arrangements through Sister Agnes at St. Catherine. The shelter needs a new washer and dryer. I will send the money anonymously. Claire stopped reading. She looked up. She looked at the wall of stone in front of her without seeing it. She turned the page. Claire's first rent on her own apartment in Hilltop has been paid for 6 months. She does not know. She will not know. Sister Agnes will tell her it is a grant program. She is too tired to question it. Henry tells me his daughter is going back to school, to be a nurse. She has saved every dollar she could. She is still short. I have made an anonymous donation in the amount of $18,000 to the Pierce County Nursing Foundation earmarked for a scholarship for a single mother applicant. There is only one single mother applicant this year. Henry will tell her she got a scholarship. He does not know. He should not know. Claire began to cry. She did not stop. For a long time, she did not stop. She turned page after page, her vision swimming, the pencil entries marching forward through the years, every milestone of her life, every quiet collapse, every quiet rescue. The roof on her first apartment that the landlord had fixed supposedly out of kindness. The hospital bill that had vanished after a phone call from someone she had never met. The one terrible Christmas after her divorce, when an anonymous toy drive at the YWCA had given Hazel a doll, and the doll had been wrapped in paper Claire had thought at the time was strange. The paper had been brown butcher paper tied with string, like a country grandfather might wrap a thing. Walter had wrapped it. Walter had driven that doll from Montana to Tacoma in his pickup truck. Walter had given it anonymously to a stranger at a YWCA because his great-niece's daughter had needed a doll that Christmas. Claire was on the floor of the chamber. She was sobbing. Hazel was holding her. And on the last page of the journal, dated 4 years ago, in a hand that was shakier than the earlier entries, Walter had written this: I am 85. I have done all that I can do from a distance. There comes a point when a man must decide whether to keep on watching or to make himself known. I have decided. When I am gone, Claire will be told. She will come here. She will find this. She will know that she was not alone. Not for one day. Not for 1 hour. She was watched over. I could not save Maggie from the creek. I could not save her. I have spent 60 years trying to save someone else. Not because Maggie would have wanted it, but because I could not bear to do nothing. Claire was the one who let me do something. May she forgive me for not telling her sooner. May she forgive me for being a coward. May she be happy in this house, where I have left every light on for her. Claire could not speak. She closed the book. She held it against her chest like she was holding something that was alive. She looked up at her daughter. Hazel. Yes, Mom. He saw us. He saw us the whole time. I know, Mom. He saw us. I know. All those nights in the car. He didn't know we were in the car, but for all the years before that, he was there. He was. He was. He was Grandpa's family, Mom. He was. Then he was our family, too. Claire put her forehead against her daughter's forehead. She wept. Hazel did not weep. Hazel watched her mother weep. Hazel said very softly, It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. That night, Claire called Ruth. Ruth answered on the second ring. Ruth. Claire. We found it. A pause, a long, careful pause. I'll be over in 15 minutes. Ruth came. She sat at the table. Claire poured her coffee. Claire pushed the journal across the table. Ruth read it. She did not say anything while she read. She read for 40 minutes. She turned the pages slowly. Once she put one finger against the corner of her right eye and held it there. Once she made a small sound more like a hum than a sob that Claire understood was the sound of a 68-year-old woman not letting herself break. When Ruth was finished, she closed the book very gently. She set it back on the table. She looked at Claire. He waited for you, Ruth said. I know. He told me once that he had not been able to save someone. He never told me her name. He said he had spent the rest of his life trying to make up for it. I thought he meant volunteer work. He gave to everything, the fire department, the library, the school. He never put his name on anything. He gave anonymously, always. I know. I never knew there was a person. I never knew it was you. I didn't know either. Honey. Yes. Listen to me. You listen to me right now. Ruth reached across the table and took Claire's hands. Ruth's hands were large for a woman her size. They were strong. They smelled faintly of horse and of lavender hand cream. You were not alone. No. Say it back. I was not alone. For one day. For one day. You were watched over, like a small light, by a man who could not have a wife and could not have children, and decided to spend his whole life making sure that one little girl, that one young woman, that one tired mother in a parking lot would always have a roof somewhere waiting for her, even if it took 60 years. Ruth? Yes. How do you what? How do I live with that? Ruth squeezed her hands. You live with it the way you live with anything good and large, slowly, and by passing it on. The local paper found out 3 weeks later. That was the way it always went. The reporter was a young woman from the Helena Independent Record who had been tipped off by someone at the courthouse who had filed Walter's estate paperwork. The estate value was a public record. The estate value was $38 million. The heir was a single mother from Tacoma named Claire Donovan. The story ran on a Tuesday. By Friday, the wire services had it. By Sunday, Vivian Donovan in Spokane was reading the story in the Spokesman Review at her kitchen table and was setting her coffee cup down very carefully on the saucer and was picking up her cell phone and was calling her brother Teddy. The phone in the cabin rang on Monday. It had not rung the entire time they had been there. Claire stood in the kitchen and she looked at the old black wall phone and she felt her stomach drop in the old way. The body knew. The body remembered. The body had been waiting. She picked up. Claire. Vivian. You little. She did not finish the sentence. She did not have to. Vivian. You little liar. You little manipulator. You let me think it was a shack. You let me laugh at you. You did laugh at me, Vivian. That was you. You knew. I didn't know. You knew. I didn't know, not when we spoke. I found out later. You knew when you went out there. I didn't know what I was going to find. You found $38 million. I did. That belongs to all of us. No, Vivian, it doesn't. A silence. The kind of silence that meant a person was rearranging their face on the other end of the line, getting the next tone right, switching from rage to something else, something more dangerous, something that knew it had to be careful. When Vivian spoke again, her voice was softer. Claire, honey, we are family. We need to talk about this. Do we? Yes, we need to come out there. Teddy, me, Cassie, we need to sit down. Like adults. Like adults. Yes. Vivian. What? Hazel said something to you on a phone a month ago. You remember. That child needs to be taught some manners. Hazel said you are weak. Claire. She was right. The silence on the line was different this time. It was the silence of a woman who had just realized she had underestimated the situation, and the silence of a woman who had decided in that instant to stop pretending. You will regret this. Vivian, you will regret this. Vivian, listen to me. Listen carefully. There is a man named Edmund Pierce. He is my attorney. If you call this number again, you will be talking to him. If you come to this property, you will be met by the sheriff. Do you understand me? Sheriff. Sheriff. You have a sheriff. I have a lot of things now, Vivian. She hung up the phone. She stood at the wall with her hands still on the receiver, and she felt her heart hammering in her chest. Not from fear, from something else. From a clean, hot anger that she had not been allowed to feel for 20 years. The anger of a younger sister who has spent her whole life being smaller, who has just for the first time refused. She turned. Hazel was standing in the kitchen doorway with Pancake the cat in her arms. Hazel looked at her mother. Her mother looked at her. Was that her? Hazel said. Yes. What did she say? That they are coming. Are they? Yes. Mom. Yes, baby. This time we have a sheriff and a lawyer and Ruth and a cabin. Right. Right. Then we are not going to lose. Claire walked to her daughter. She knelt down on the kitchen floor in the late October light coming in through the window. She put her arms around her daughter and Pancake the cat and the flannel shirt and the small, steady heart inside all of it. We are not going to lose, she said. She did not yet know how true this would have to be. Marcus called at 2 in the morning. Claire had been asleep. She had been asleep deeply, for the first time in a long time. Then the cabin phone was ringing, and she was sitting up in the dark, and her heart was already running before her brain caught up. She came down the stairs in her sweater and her socks. She picked up. Hello. A sound, not a word. A sound a person makes when they are trying to speak through something thick. Marcus. How did you? Marcus, it's 2 in the morning. I know. Are you drunk? No. Are you sober? Yes. How long? 41 days. She sat down on the kitchen chair. She did not say anything for a long moment, because Marcus had not been sober for 41 days in a row since he was 20. Marcus was 42. Marcus was the brother she had loved most before any of them broke. Marcus had been the one who taught her to ride a bike. Marcus had been the best man at her terrible wedding. Marcus had been silent for 2 years while their father died and the money disappeared and Claire and Hazel went into the Honda. Marcus, I have to tell you something. All right, you need to sit down. I'm sitting. It's bad. I know it's bad. Why else would you be calling me at 2? A laugh from him, wet, broken, almost a sob. Claire, tell me. Vivian hired a private investigator. Okay. A year ago. A year ago. Wait. A year ago, Claire. She did the math. A year ago, she was sleeping in the Honda. Hazel was 8. Hazel had a lunchbox with a broken zipper. Claire had been applying for jobs at every hospital in Pierce County and being turned down. A year ago, there was no Walter, no cabin, no letter. Why? To follow you. Why? Because she thought. A long pause. Marcus? She thought you were going to lose her. Lose. Hazel. She thought you were going to lose Hazel to the state. Claire could not feel her hands. Why would Vivian? Because she had a plan, Claire. If the state took Hazel, if you got, picked up, or if Hazel got pulled out of school, Vivian was going to file as next of kin, as the responsible sibling, to take her, to adopt her, to foster her first, then adopt. Why? Claire. Marcus, why? Because the state pays for foster placements, about $1,000 a month for a healthy child, sometimes more, with a stipend on top for clothing and medical and a tax credit at the end of the year. Vivian had run the numbers. She showed me, she told me. She thought she was being practical. Claire could not breathe. She put one hand flat on the kitchen table. She pushed, as if she could push the table through the floor, as if she could push herself out of her own body. She wanted my daughter for money. Yes. For money. Yes. Marcus. I know. Marcus. I know. You let her. I didn't help. You let her. Claire. You let her, Marcus. I know. You knew. I knew. I am telling you because I knew. Because I am 41 days sober, and a man at the meeting last night said that the truth was the only thing that worked. And I have one piece of truth in me, and it is yours, not theirs, not mine, yours. She did not speak. She could not. They are coming, Claire, all three of them. Vivian, Teddy, Cassie. They have a lawyer. His name is Gerald Vance. He is from Portland. He is expensive. They have a photographer. Cassie's idea. To document, quote, your living conditions. They are going to file for guardianship of Hazel. They are going to say you are mentally unfit. They are going to say the cabin is unsafe for a child. They will not. They will. They are. When? 11 days. The hearing is in 11 days in Helena. How? They paid expedited filing fees. They have judges they know. Vivian knows everyone. Claire stood up. She did not know why she stood up. She just could not stay sitting. Marcus. Yes. Why are you telling me? A long silence. Because I want one good thing on the other side of the ledger from me. Before I die, I want one thing. You are not dying. I am 42 years old, and I have done nothing good. I would like to do one thing. I would like for you to win, and then I would like to never bother you again, if that is what you want. That is what I would like. She closed her eyes. She pressed the receiver against her forehead. Marcus? Yes. Will you testify? I will do whatever you ask. Will you testify? Yes. All right. Claire. What? I am sorry. I know. I am so. Marcus. Yes. I cannot forgive you tonight. I know. Maybe not ever. I know. But I will not waste what you are giving me. I will use it. Do you understand? Yes. Hang up the phone, go to sleep. Tell the man at your meeting that you told the truth. Yes. Goodbye, Marcus. Goodbye, Claire. She hung up. She sat in the dark for a long time. The kitchen was very quiet. The clock on the wall ticked. The cat moved somewhere upstairs. Hazel did not wake up. Hazel slept like the dead now in this house in her own bed with her cat at her feet. Claire put her face in her hands. She did not cry. She had run out of crying. She got up at 4. She made coffee. She called Edmund Pierce at 6. She called Sister Agnes at 6:15. Sister Agnes drove 6 hours from Tacoma. She arrived at 3 in the afternoon. She was carrying a small overnight bag and a tin of cookies that she had baked at 5 that morning before she left the convent. The cookies were thumbprint cookies with raspberry jam in the centers. She gave them to Hazel without explanation. Hazel said, "These are like my name." "Yes," said Sister Agnes. "They are like your name." The lawyer Edmund recommended was named Margaret Holloway. Margaret was 54 years old. She had been practicing family and estate law in Helena for 26 years. She wore a navy blazer over a white shirt and a strand of pearls that had belonged to her grandmother. She had short gray hair and the kind of eyes that did not blink when other people blinked. She came up to the cabin on the 4th day before the hearing. She sat at the kitchen table and she drank Ruth Calloway's coffee and she listened. She listened to Claire tell the whole story. The money, the Honda, the phone call from Vivian, the phone call from Marcus. When Claire was done, Margaret set her coffee cup down and she said, "Ms. Donovan." "Yes, they are going to lose." "Are they?" "Yes." "How do you know?" "Because in 26 years, I have learned to recognize what a winning case looks like and what a losing case looks like. They have a losing case. They have it badly. They have it the way a man who has built his house on sand has a foundation. They have a lawyer. They have a Portland lawyer who has flown into a county where I have known the judges since the Reagan administration. They have money. You also have money. I have already filed paperwork to release a working sum from the estate. We will not lose this for lack of resources. They have photographs. Of what? Of the Honda. Of me. From a year ago. Photographs of you at your hardest moment are not evidence of unfitness. They are evidence of survival. We will introduce them ourselves. Before they do, Claire looked at her. You will. Yes. Why? Margaret Holloway leaned back in her chair. She looked out the kitchen window at the mountains. Because I represented my own mother when I was 28, she said. She had been beaten by my father for 26 years. The state of Montana did not believe her. I made them believe her. I have been doing this work ever since. Your sister thinks she is going to come into my courtroom and tell my judge that a homeless mother is an unfit mother. I am going to take her apart, Ms. Donovan. I am going to take her apart with great care. Sister Agnes, sitting at the other end of the table, said quietly, Good. Margaret looked at her. Sister. Yes. You will testify. I have already packed. Good. Sheriff Dale Brennan was 61 years old. He had been the sheriff of Jefferson County for 22 years. He had known Walter Hayes. He had played poker with Walter twice a month from 1989 until Walter became too sick. He had carried Walter's casket. He had cried at the graveside. He was not a man given to crying. He came up to the cabin on the third day before the hearing. He brought a small black device in a plastic evidence bag. Ma'am, Sheriff, this was on the underside of your car. My car. Your Honda, behind the rear bumper, magnetic, GPS tracker, active, reporting back to a private investigation firm in Spokane. Claire stared at the bag. How long? It's old, battery on its third replacement. Best guess, about a year. A year. Yes, ma'am. They were tracking us. Yes, ma'am. In Tacoma. Yes, ma'am. While we were sleeping in the car. Yes, ma'am. That is illegal. Yes, ma'am, it is. In Washington and in Montana, both, without consent. What does this mean? It means Sheriff Brennan said that I have a felony charge available to me against the family member who paid the firm, whichever one that was. Claire closed her eyes. She opened them. Vivian. Yes, ma'am, I expect. Sheriff. Yes, ma'am. Will you bring this to the hearing? I will bring this to the hearing. Will you testify? I will testify. Sheriff. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. He took off his hat. He held it against his chest. He looked at her for a long time. Ma'am, Walter Hayes was the finest man I ever knew. I never had children. I never married. I had Walter and our poker game. And I want you to know that on the day we lowered him into the ground, I said a thing to that hole in the ground. I said, Walter, whatever you wanted, I will see it done. So whatever you need from me, Ms. Donovan, you have. Claire could not speak. He put his hat back on. He nodded to Hazel, who was watching from the staircase. He left. The night before the hearing, the storm came. Claire had been waiting for it. The sky had been low and gray for 2 days, and the wind had been wrong, and the cattle in the valley below had been moving the way cattle move when they know. She and Ruth and Sister Agnes were in the kitchen at 8 that night when the first wet flakes hit the windows. Hazel was at the table with her notebook. She was drawing, not houses. Tonight she was drawing something else. Tonight she was drawing the courtroom. She had asked Margaret Holloway about it that afternoon. The bench, the witness stand, the flag, the seal of the state of Montana on the wall. She was getting it all down. Sister Agnes asked her what she was making. A map, said Hazel. A map of what? of where we are going tomorrow. I want to know how the room is shaped, so I know where to look when they call me." The three women at the kitchen looked at each other. Claire said, "Hazel, yes, you do not have to do this. I know. You do not have to testify. I know. Margaret can keep you out of it. I know." Hazel kept drawing. She drew a small figure on the witness stand. The figure had a yellow backpack on the floor beside it. The figure was holding a notebook. The figure was 9 years old. "Mom, yes. Aunt Vivian wanted me for money." Sister Agnes put her hand on Ruth's wrist under the table. Ruth did not move. Claire said, "Yes. Money from the state for being a foster mom." "Yes." "And then when Uncle Walter's money came, to get that." "Yes." "For both kinds of money." "Yes." "Mom, yes. I want to tell the judge." "You do not have to." "I want to tell the judge." She looked up. Her face was very calm, very still. The face of a child who has thought a thing through, who has decided. "Mom, the lady at the courthouse needs to see me. She needs to see what I look like. She needs to see that I am not somebody's plan to make money. She needs to see that I am a girl with a mother who has a notebook and a cat and a school." Claire could not speak. Ruth said very quietly, "That's a good reason, sweetheart." Sister Agnes said, "That's a holy reason." Hazel nodded. She went back to her drawing. The snow fell. The Jefferson County Courthouse was built in 1888. It was on the corner of Main and Whitehall in Boulder, the county seat 27 miles south of the cabin. The stairs going up were stone. The doors were heavy oak. The hallway inside smelled like floor wax and old paper, and the particular tension of a small-town courtroom on the day a wealthy family is going to fight a poor sister. The room was full. Half of Cedar Falls was there. Ruth Calloway, Edmund Pierce, the librarian from Cedar Falls, a woman named Patrice Lindeman, who had loved Walter for 30 years in the quiet way of small-town librarians who do not say such things. The mechanic, the school principal, Mrs. Annalise Pratt Hazel's teacher, who had taken a personal day, Sister Agnes in her black skirt and white blouse and the small silver cross, the owner of the grocery store, the owner of the post office, the owner of the gas station. On the other side of the aisle were Vivian, Teddy, and Cassie. They looked like a magazine ad. Vivian in a charcoal pantsuit, Teddy in a blue blazer, Cassie in a cream blouse and pearls. The photographer Marcus had warned about was in the back row, camera ready. Gerald Vance, the lawyer from Portland, sat between them in a suit that probably cost more than the Honda Civic. Claire walked down the aisle with Hazel's hand in hers. Hazel was wearing a navy dress that Ruth had sewn for her over 2 days. The dress had a small embroidered hazel branch on the collar. Ruth's idea. Ruth's grandmother had taught her embroidery in 1962. Ruth had not done it in 30 years. She had done it for Hazel. Claire was wearing a gray suit Margaret had taken her to buy in Helena. She did not look like a homeless woman. She did not feel like one either. Not anymore. Judge Helen Marsh was 62. She had short white hair, wire-rimmed glasses, a face that did not give anything away. Margaret had told Claire one thing about her the day before. Judge Marsh had raised 3 children on her own from 1986 to 2004 after her husband walked out on her. She had put herself through law school nights. She had been on the bench for 28 years. Margaret had said, she knows what a single mother is. Margaret had said, that is all I will say. The hearing began. Gerald Vance stood first. He was smooth, he was polished. He had a deep, calm voice. He spoke of concerns, he spoke of the welfare of the child. He spoke of Claire's 17 months in a car as if those months had been a choice she had made. He held up photographs from the private investigator. The Honda in the Walmart parking lot. Claire eating a granola bar at a picnic table. Hazel washing her face with a baby wipe in the back seat. He spoke for 40 minutes. When he was done, Judge Marsh said one word, "Counselor." That was Margaret. Margaret stood up. She did not raise her voice. She did not make speeches. She walked. She placed exhibits. She introduced the bank records of the $87,000 in loans Claire had given her siblings from their father's insurance. She introduced the unanswered text messages. She introduced the unanswered calls. She introduced the legal demand letters Claire had sent 2 years ago that had been ignored. She introduced Sheriff Brennan and the GPS tracker. Gerald Vance objected. He was overruled. She introduced Marcus Donovan. Marcus walked to the stand. He did not look at his sisters as he passed. He sat. He took the oath. He spoke quietly. He spoke clearly. He spoke for 9 minutes about what Vivian had told him at her kitchen table 16 months ago, with a calculator in front of her, about how much the state of Washington paid for a foster placement of a healthy school-age child. When he was done, Vivian's face was the color of paper. Margaret called Sister Agnes. Sister Agnes spoke for 11 minutes about Claire at 19, about Claire at 36, about a mother who in 23 years of intermittent contact with the shelter had never once raised her voice at her child, had never once let her child miss a day of school, had never once spent $1 on herself before her daughter ate. Sister Agnes was on the stand when she said, "I have known 912 mothers at our shelter in my 46 years there. I keep a list. I write down the names. I pray for each of them. Claire Donovan is one of the strongest among them, possibly the strongest. And to use her hardest moments as a weapon against her in this courtroom is, in my professional and spiritual opinion, an obscenity." Gerald Vance did not object. He did not move. Then Margaret said, "Your Honor, I would like to introduce one final piece of evidence. Counselor, it is a video recording made by Walter James Hayes 6 months before his death. He left it with his attorney, Mr. Edmund Pierce, with instructions that it was to be shown only in the event of a legal challenge from his family to the inheritance of Claire Donovan. We are now in that event." Judge Marsh looked at Edmund Pierce in the front row. Edmund nodded. "You may proceed." A bailiff wheeled in an old television on a cart. A VCR was plugged in. Margaret put the tape in. She pressed play. The screen filled with static. Then there was Walter. He was sitting at the desk in the underground room. Behind him, the shelves were full. The paintings, the books, the crates. He was wearing a flannel shirt. His hair was thin and white. His face was the face of a man who had lived 85 years in the mountains and had loved one woman and had lost her and had spent the rest of his life trying to be a kind of light for someone he did not know. He looked into the camera. He spoke. "My name is Walter James Hayes. I am of sound mind. My doctor will testify to that. My attorney is recording this with my consent." He paused. He took a breath. "If you are watching this, then my family has come for Claire." He let that sit. "I have been expecting them for 31 years. I knew them in their first marriages. I knew them in their first jobs. I have watched them. I know what they are. I knew Vivian when she was 13 and she took her sister's birthday money. I knew Teddy when he was 20 and he wrecked his father's truck and let his brother be blamed. I knew Cassie when she was 24 and she borrowed $6,000 from her sister for what she called a medical emergency." A pause. "It was not a medical emergency." Vivian in the second row made a sound. "To Claire Donovan, if you are watching this, I want to say what I have wanted to say for 40 years. Your father loved you. He told me. He told me at every family gathering. He would pull me aside and he would say, 'My Claire is the one who gives.' I do not know how she ended up so different from the others, but she is the one." He said that many times. He said that until he died. Claire put her hand over her mouth. She did not lower it. "I could not save someone once, a long time ago. I spent the rest of my life trying to save someone else. I picked you, not because of blood, because of character, because I watched you give until you had nothing left, and then watch you give a little more. Blood does not make a family. Character makes a family. You are my family. You have been since you were 6 years old, and you gave the last roll on the platter to your cousin without being asked. He looked into the camera. He was looking across years into Claire's face. I left every light on for you, Claire. Welcome home. The screen went to static. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Judge Marsh did not move for a long time. She removed her glasses. She set them on the bench. She rubbed the bridge of her nose with 2 fingers. Then she put her glasses back on. She said, Counselor. Margaret rose. I have one final witness, Your Honor. Who? Hazel Donovan. Hazel walked to the stand. The yellow backpack was on the floor by her chair where she had left it. She did not bring it up. She brought her notebook instead. She held it against her chest. She climbed the 2 steps to the witness chair. She sat. Her feet did not touch the ground. The bailiff brought a stool. She put her feet on the stool. She raised her right hand. She took the oath in a clear, careful voice. Margaret approached, did not stand close, stood far enough back that Hazel could see Claire across the room. Hazel. Yes, ma'am. How old are you? 9. Do you know why we are here today? Yes, ma'am. My aunts and my uncle want to take me away from my mother and take the cabin. Do you want to live with your aunts and your uncle? No, ma'am. Why not? A pause. Hazel opened the notebook on her lap. She turned to a page. She held it up. It was the very first drawing in the notebook. A drawing she had done 2 years ago, in a parking lot, in Tacoma. It was a house with 3 figures holding hands in front of it. This is the house I used to draw, she said. When I lived in the car, I drew it every day, sometimes twice a day. I drew it because I did not have one. The 3 people are me and my mom and my grandpa Henry. Even though my grandpa Henry was already dead, I still put him in, because that was the family I wanted. She turned the page. A new drawing, done last week. The cabin, with the porch, with the mountains behind it, with 4 figures now. Claire, Hazel, a woman who was clearly Ruth, a nun who was clearly Sister Agnes, and up on the hill behind the cabin, a small stone with a name on it, Walter. This is what my family looks like now. There are more people in it now. None of them are my aunts. None of them are my uncle. They were not in my drawings before, and they are not in my drawings now. They never wanted to be. Hazel turned the page. My mom is not crazy. My mom is not unfit. My mom is the person who slept on the cold side of the car so that I could sleep on the warm side. My mom is the person who taught me to read in the public library. My mom is the person who fed me before she fed herself, every day, for 17 months. I was watching. She lifted her face. She looked at Judge Marsh. Please. Yes. Please do not let them take me. Hazel. Yes, ma'am. Look at me. Hazel looked at her. The judge looked at the little girl on the witness stand. The judge took off her glasses. The judge wiped her eyes. The judge put her glasses back on. She said very gently, You may step down, sweetheart. Hazel stepped down. She walked across the courtroom. She climbed into her mother's lap. She put her arms around her mother's neck. The petition was denied. It was denied with prejudice, which means it could not be refiled. Judge Marsh ordered Vivian, Teddy, and Cassie Donovan to pay every dollar of Claire's legal expenses. She referred the matter of the GPS tracker to the Spokane County District Attorney for criminal investigation. She thanked the witnesses. She thanked Hazel. She left the bench. Vivian did not look at Claire as she gathered her things. Teddy did not look at her. Cassie did not look at her. They walked out of the courtroom past the Cedar Falls people, who did not look at them either, and they got into a black SUV, and they drove south, and Claire would not see any of them in person for the rest of her life. The healing did not come fast. That is the part nobody tells you. Winning does not heal. Winning just stops the bleeding. Healing comes after. Claire began seeing a therapist in Helena 2 weeks after the hearing. Her name was Dr. Iris Holloway. She was Margaret Holloway's older sister. Margaret had recommended her. Iris was 67, semi-retired, took only 6 patients, took Claire as her seventh. They met every Wednesday. The first session, Iris asked one question. What does safe feel like to you? Claire could not answer. She sat in Iris's office for 40 minutes. She tried to answer. She could not. Finally, she said, I do not know yet. I have not been there long enough. Iris said, that is the right answer. They worked on it for 2 years. She learned that she could leave a window unlocked at night and the world would not end. She learned that she could buy a thing for herself, a small thing, a hand cream from the Cedar Falls drugstore, and not feel sick about it for 3 days. She learned that her body could stop bracing. It took her 8 months to stop checking the lock on the cabin door 3 times before bed. It took her a year to stop hoarding canned goods under the kitchen counter. It took her almost 2 years to sleep through a full night without waking once. Hazel healed faster. Children heal faster. That is one of the small mercies of the world. By Christmas, Hazel was a different child. By spring, she had 3 best friends in Cedar Falls, and she was on the volleyball team, and she had read every book in the school library twice. By summer, she had a horse, a small bay mare she named Cookie. Ruth taught her to ride. Owen Whitaker came in March. He was 45. He had been a smoke jumper for the Forest Service for 15 years. He had jumped fires in Idaho, Montana, California, Oregon. He had worked with Walter Hayes one summer when Walter had come back as a consultant to teach the young men how to read a fire. Walter had taught Owen how to build a fire line in country he did not know. Walter had taught Owen how to build a cabin too in the long evenings around the camp. Owen had built 3 cabins of his own in the years since. Owen's wife Eleanor had died of breast cancer 7 years before. Owen had stopped jumping. He had taken up cabinet making. He came up the road one Saturday in March with his old red truck and a cooler and a clipboard. He had heard in the way small Montana counties hear that there was going to be a community building project on Walter's land. He wanted to be part of it. Claire met him on the porch. He took off his hat. Ma'am, Mr. Whitaker. Owen. A pause. Walter Hayes taught me how to set a corner post in 1996. I never forgot it. I would like to set the corner posts on whatever you are building here, for free, as a way of saying thank you to him. Owen. Yes, ma'am. That is the kindest thing anyone has said to me in months. Yes, ma'am. He looked at her. She looked at him. Pancake the cat came out onto the porch and rubbed against his boot. He smiled. It was a small smile. It was a careful smile. It was the smile of a man who had been alone for 7 years and who had not until that moment remembered that smiling was a thing he did. Claire smiled back. It would be 21 months before they would hold hands on the porch swing. It would be 3 years before she would marry him in front of the cabin under a canopy Ruth had made of pine boughs and tied with ribbon Hazel had braided. But that first morning in March, with the snow still in the high meadows and the mud thick in the road, that was the morning the second life began. Not by a thunderclap, by a man taking off his hat, and a woman saying yes to a corner post. They built the foundation that summer. Marcus showed up in May. 41 days had become 283 days sober. He drove an old Subaru with 1 different colored door. He stopped at the bottom of the road. He walked the last quarter mile. Claire saw him from the porch. She put down her coffee. She walked out to meet him in the road. Marcus, Claire, what are you doing here? I don't know. Marcus, I don't want anything. Marcus, what? I just wanted to look at it. I just wanted to look at the place. Where Uncle Walter, where you ended up. She looked at him, her brother, 42 years old, looking like an old man, looking like someone who had been disassembled and put back together with most of the screws but not all of them. She did not invite him in. She said, there are leaves on the lawn by the porch. Yes. You can rake them. Yes. There is a rake in the shed. Yes. Do not come into the house. No. There is a coffee. I will put it on the porch railing. You can drink it in the yard. Yes. He raked for 3 hours. Then he drank the coffee on the lawn. Then he got in his Subaru and he drove away. He came back in June. He raked again. He weeded a flower bed Ruth had started. He drank coffee on the lawn. He came back in July, in August, in September. In October, Claire put a folding chair on the porch. In November, she put 2 folding chairs. In December, she invited him into the kitchen. In January, she made him a sandwich. It would be 2 more years before she would call him brother again. It would be 3 before she would mean it. That was the kind of forgiveness she found she could give. Slow, with conditions, built one rake stroke at a time, earned, not declared, repeated, not assumed. She wrote a letter to Vivian every Christmas. She wrote a letter to Teddy every Christmas. She wrote a letter to Cassie every Christmas. None of them ever replied. She kept writing, not for them, for her, so that the door on her side would never be the door that was closed. She would not give them that either. She would not give them the version of the story where she was the one who stopped trying. The foundation broke ground that summer. It was named by Hazel's request for Walter, the Walter Hayes Foundation for Single Mothers and Their Children. It had a board of 7 women, including Margaret Iris, Sister Agnes Ruth, and Patrice the librarian. It had a small office in Cedar Falls. It had a partnership with St. Catherine in Tacoma. It had 6 small cabins on the back 40 of Walter's land, each one a place where a mother and her children could come and stay for 90 days while they got on their feet. The first family arrived in October, a woman named Trish, her 7-year-old son Wyatt. They had been sleeping in a Subaru. Claire met them in the driveway. She did not make a speech. She did not put on a face. She just walked up to Trish, who was getting Wyatt out of the back seat, and she said, "Hi, I'm Claire. I slept in a Honda for 17 months. We have soup on the stove. Come inside." Trish broke, right there in the gravel. Claire held her. Wyatt and Hazel stood there and looked at each other. Hazel said, "I have a cat. Her name is Pancake. Do you want to see her?" Wyatt said yes. That was the beginning. By the end of the 2nd year, 23 families had come through. By the end of the 5th year, 312. 5 years. 5 years after the morning, a letter had come to a women's shelter in Tacoma. The foundation held a dedication ceremony for a memorial garden behind the cabin. It was a small garden. River stones from the creek. Native plants. A bench. A stone marker. The marker said one thing: Walter James Hayes. He left the lights on. 300 people came, most of Cedar Falls, many of the women from the foundation. Sister Agnes, who was 77 now and slower but still there. Ruth, 73, in her Good Barn coat. Edmund Pierce, 79, who needed a cane now, but who still drove himself. Marcus, 3 years sober, who sat in the back. Margaret. Iris. Sheriff Brennan, retired, who came up from his place in the valley. Hazel was 14. She wore a dress. She read a short poem she had written. Then Claire walked to the small podium under the pines. She was 43. She had silver at her temples she had not had 5 years ago. She did not diet. She liked it. She looked out at the people. She looked at her daughter in the front row sitting next to Owen, who had her hand on his arm. She looked at Ruth. She looked at Sister Agnes. She said 17 months. She paused. That is how long my daughter and I lived in a car. The crowd was very still. For a long time, I thought those 17 months were the worst thing that had happened to me. The worst thing I had ever lived through. The thing I would carry in shame for the rest of my life. I was wrong about that. I was wrong about a lot of things. She paused. What I have learned in the 5 years since a man named Walter Hayes left me a key is this: you do not need someone to save you. You are saving yourself every day when you are inside of something hard, even when no one is watching, even when it feels pointless. You are saving yourself. That is happening whether you can feel it or not. She paused. She looked at the ground. She looked up. What you need, she said, is someone to see you, to know that you are doing it, to know that what looks from the outside like failure is actually the slow, hard work of survival. You need one person to see you. One. That is all. She looked at the stone marker on the small rise behind her. Walter saw me. From a distance I did not know about. For 38 years. He could not save the woman he loved when he was 32. He spent the rest of his life saving me instead. Most of it anonymously. Most of it in ways I will never know. Her voice broke. She steadied it. What he taught me is that we cannot save anyone. We can only see them, and see them, and see them. And in the seeing, the person finds the strength they already had. To save themselves, she paused. 312 mothers have come through this foundation in 5 years. 312. We do not save them. We see them. We feed them while they save themselves. That is the only work. That is all of it. She stepped back from the podium. The applause was long. It was the long, careful applause of a crowd that does not want to break the moment. Ruth wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Sister Agnes did not wipe her eyes. She just held her hands folded in her lap. Owen squeezed Hazel's arm. Hazel pressed her face into his shoulder. After the ceremony, Claire walked alone up the small hill behind the cabin. She walked to the marker. She knelt. She put one red rose on the stone. She said very quietly, so that no one would hear, "I will keep seeing them, Uncle Walter. I will keep the lights on." She stayed there for a few minutes, then she stood up. She walked back down the hill. The cabin was in the late afternoon light, smoke from the chimney, the screen door open. Owen on the porch looking up the hill, waiting for her. Hazel in the kitchen laughing about something with Sister Agnes. Ruth in the rocker on the porch dozing Pancake the cat asleep in her lap. Both of them very old now, both of them very happy. Claire stopped at the bottom of the hill. She looked at it. The whole picture, the cabin, the mountains, her family, the family she had not been born into, the family she had walked eventually the long road into. She thought, I am home. She thought this is what home is. She thought my father was right. The sun was going down on the far peaks. The light was the color of honey. A magpie called twice in the timber and then went silent. Claire walked up the porch steps. Owen stood up. He held out his hand. She took it. She did not let go. She walked with him into the kitchen where her daughter was laughing, where the kettle was on, where the cat was waking up, where the wood smoke was already curling in the chimney for the night to come. The door of the cabin closed behind them. The mountains stood the way mountains do. And up on the hill in the last light, the red rose on the gray stone glowed for a moment like a small held flame. And then the dusk came on the slow blue Montana dusk, and the rose was a dark shape on the stone, and the wind moved through the pines the way it had moved through them for 60 years. And somewhere far down in the timber, an owl called once, and the world kept turning the way the world does, with its small kept lights, and its small kept promises, and its small, faithful, quiet women who see each other in the dark and do not look away.